I was spreading rock salt on my driveway in Minneapolis just trying to keep someone from eating pavement on the ice when a voice cut through the cold so sharp it felt like a knife through butter. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" 3 words, and suddenly the morning became a scene from a bad sitcom. Only it wasn't funny. Not then. Not yet. She came striding across the street like she owned it. Brenda Whitmore, the HOA president. Hair pulled back so tight her face looked like a map of tension coat so expensive it could make mortgage payments for a month, and she pointed at my bag of salt like it was contraband. "You need to stop that immediately," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what that stuff does to the environment, to pets, to our concrete?" I straightened up, salt gritty between my gloves, and thought, I bought a house to have space, not to get micromanaged by a medieval monarch with a smartphone. I'm Robert Chambers, 37, mechanical engineer, new homeowner, who believed the dream came with a mailbox and a front porch, not a handbook of petty rules enforced by someone with a binder and an attitude. My driveway isn't a common area, it's my property. Rock salt is how Minnesotans survive winter. It melts ice, prevents people from breaking bones, keeps delivery drivers from doing dramatic slow-motion falls on my front steps. To me, this was common sense. To Brenda, it was an aesthetic crime. She read to me Section 7, Subsection 3 like a priest reading scripture. Any substance that could damage common areas or negatively impact the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. That's vague enough to mean anything, which is the point when someone wants power. She tapped her phone, declared she'd issue a formal violation if I didn't remove the salt by morning, and threatened fines, $50 a day, and legal escalation. Then she marched back to her spotless, immaculate house driveway, clear, probably heated, which is to say she had resources and the taste to match. Neighbors peeked out. Tom shook his head and muttered, "Welcome to Riverside Heights," like it was a league nobody wanted to join. Brenda had been president for 3 years, long enough to think rules were her religion. She'd tried banning Christmas lights after December 26th, fined people for leaving garbage cans out, even cited a woman because a kid's skateboard sat in a driveway overnight. It was petty, and it was personal, and now I was in the crosshairs. I went inside, tracked snow onto my hardwood, fired up my laptop, and found the email waiting, official-looking, threatening fines, and lien if I didn't comply. I read the HOA covenants. I'd signed 100 pages of legalese, mostly about paint colors and lawn maintenance. Nowhere did it explicitly ban rock salt. The clause she cited was broad enough to justify anything, a perfect tool for someone who wanted to control the neighborhood's look more than its safety. I called Minneapolis Public Works because sometimes the simplest thing, a municipal recommendation, is the thing that brings wonky adults back to earth. After a polite hold tune and a helpful woman named Sandra from Winter Maintenance, I got the line, "We use rock salt on every public street in the city. It's legal and recommended for safety." She offered to get it in writing from the legal team. Boom, vindication, but also worry, because Brenda wasn't the kind to take advice from the city unless it matched her mood. That night, my girlfriend Grace came over with red wine and Thai food and listened while I rehearsed the increasingly absurd details, a woman policing salt like it was a war crime. Grace, a teacher who knows liability from schoolyard rules, looked at me over the pad thai and said, "If a delivery guy slips on your steps because you listen to this woman, who's liable?" She was right. Forcing dangerous conditions can create liability. That reframed everything. This wasn't about salt, it was about safety. And safety has a funny way of trumping aesthetics in court. Morning brought another email from Brenda. Fines begin. Now Mr. Chambers, and my inbox felt like a small legal battlefield. I called a lawyer, Patricia Mendoza, who specialized in HOA disputes. She listened, then said HOAs can set standards. Yes, but they can't prohibit required or recommended safety measures. Keep every email. Document everything. That was the plan. Document, forward the city letter, and be ready. Patricia sent a letter to the HOA, crisp, lawyerly, referencing Minnesota statutes and the liability risks of forbidding safety practices. I expected silence or a curt dismissal. What I didn't expect was a call from Jeff Patterson, one of the board members, asking to speak privately. "Mr. Chambers, I had no idea Brenda was doing this," he said, voice low and steady. "I'm calling an emergency meeting." There, the twist I didn't see coming. Not everyone on the board was on Brenda's side. This quiet, practical guy was about to shift the entire story. The emergency meeting at the community center felt cinematic. Folding chairs, breath visible in the cold lobby. 20 neighbors packed in. Brenda perched at the center of the board like a general. She hit her gavel and announced the meeting's purpose. I stood, explained the city's position, and then, like a movie turning its gears, Patricia strode in, briefcase in hand, and laid out legal precedent. She explained that if we complied with Brenda's demand and someone got hurt, the HOA could face enormous liability, 6 figures if someone fractured a skull, more if it got ugly. The room buzzed. Marcus, the treasurer, flipped through insurance documents, his face losing color. Dorothy, an elder board member, spoke up about precedent and decency. Jeff moved to rescind the violation and amend the rules to explicitly allow city-recommended safety measures. Vote called, hands went up. Brenda stood alone. Motion passed. The crowd applauded. I breathed for the first time in days. Grace squeezed my hand, and it felt like we'd won the small war. But victory is rarely neat. Brenda intercepted us in the parking lot, cheeks flushed, and promised retribution. "I'll be watching you, Robert, every little thing." Patricia said the word nobody wants to hear. "That's harassment, illegal." Brenda stomped off, and for a while things were quiet. I salted my driveway. The neighborhood went back to normal. I thought that maybe finally peace had been bought with a lawyer's letter and a board vote. Then in late spring, after the snow had melted and my yard started to look like spring, instead of a frozen battlefield, all 4 tires on my car were slashed. Clean cuts, deliberate. When the police came, the neighbor Johnson checked his security footage, and what played on the grainy midnight screen looked like bad theater. A hooded figure crouches, works on each tire. A gust of wind pulls back the hood, and there for a heartbeat, Brenda's face. The footage was awful, and perfect in the worst way. I didn't want things to escalate to criminal charges, but I also couldn't ignore evidence. The police took statements. Officer Martinez looked me in the eye and said, "We'll need to pursue this." Brenda was arrested days later. She screamed in handcuffs about being framed, about tyranny, about how I had ruined her life. It was messy. It was human. It was necessary. She pleaded guilty to criminal damage, got probation, restitution for tires, a fine, and crucially a restraining order. And then another twist, the one where the onion peels back and all the rot shows. Jeff called another meeting and told us the HOA books didn't balance. An audit found almost $18,000 missing, fake invoices, payments to ghost contractors, landscaping jobs that never happened. When the investigators traced the money, it pointed right at Brenda. She was arrested again, this time for felony theft by fraud, faced a real reckoning, and ultimately took a plea, probation, restitution, community service, and the judge barred her from the neighborhood. She sold her house and moved away. We laughed about it later. Dark laughter, the kind that comes when a small neighborhood drama turns into something out of a true crime podcast. The plaque the HOA jokingly wanted to give me, in recognition of saving the neighborhood with rock salt, felt ridiculous and oddly tender. Jeff proved to be a steady, humane leader. Patricia became a friend who had taught me paperwork could be armor. Grace and I got engaged, and the community slowly shifted from one person's obsession to something a little saner and more communal. There's a moral here, but it's not neat. It's not a bumper sticker slogan about standing up for yourself. The lesson arrived like a cold morning sun after weeks of fog. Small things can reveal big rot. A tyrant's first rules tend to be petty, because petty gives cover for greed. And when someone uses minor authority to shame and control, they may be hiding worse habits. Standing up over a bag of rock salt wasn't noble in itself, but in refusing to bend, I helped expose a pattern that threatened more than aesthetics. It threatened money, safety, neighbors' quiet lives. Justice or karma didn't look like perfect redemption. Brenda's life didn't reset to zero and then bloom. She lost a house, a reputation, maybe a future she'd planned under the guise of authority. Some days I feel bad about the damage to a human life. Other days I think about the people she'd targeted, the old woman fined for a skateboard, the family whose trash cans were policed, the HOA funds missing, and the community betrayed. The payoff felt fair in the way that a locked door feels fair after you've been burgled. The neighborhood healed. We changed rules, clarified enforcement, created transparency, started doing the real work of community events, maintenance, actual safety, not policing. And each winter when I sprinkle salt on my driveway and the flakes bite into the concrete, I smile because it stands for something now, a small act of self-care that turned into standing up for everyone else's quiet life. So here's the question I can't shake. And I want to hear your take when someone in your community wields rules like a weapon. Do you stand up and risk escalation, or do you keep your head down to avoid trouble? Is it ever okay to let small injustices slide to preserve peace, or does silence enable worse things? Drop a comment. Tell me a time you stood up, or a time you wished you had. If you think justice was served here, say why. If you think it went too far, say that too. Share your story, and if this gave you any kind of chuckle or catharsis and share it with the neighbor who refuses to salt their driveway, maybe your little act of courage will be the pebble that starts someone else's avalanche.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.